We are in the middle of Likutey Moharan Torah Yud Zayin, and we just finished part 7, Od Zayin in this Torah. This Torah is called VaYehi Merikim Sakehem. And Rabbi Nachman explains to us in this Torah the way in which giving tzedakah will lead us to experiencing and receiving the light from the tzaddik. This specific, unique, special light that the tzaddik shines in our hearts that will allow us to experience a deeper, greater state of awe and love of Hashem. And so this is the process that begins by giving tzedakah. Rabbi Nachman says when we give tzedakah, and we give tzedakah to many people, or we give tzedakah to one person that includes within his soul many people, and so it's as if you gave to many people, then the tzedakah that you're giving to all of these many people creates a field of love energy between you and all of the recipients of your tzedakah. And that love energy dissipates and dissolves any hatred energy in the environment, in this space. And that hatred energy, which is removed from this field of space, is an interference. And so that interference is the hatred energy, which was dissolved through the love energy. And now that this space, this area, this field of space is filled with this love energy, and this peaceful energy, and this pure energy, so the words of the tzaddik, the words of Mordechai, the words of truth, reverberate and resonate even in the darkest, farthest corners of the earth. And to such a point that they are considered, those words that are spoken are considered as if they're inscribed, written, in reality. And they travel, they resonate so far that they are even manifested in the books of other religions, in the religious books of the 70 nations of idol worshippers. And they're manifested in those books as words of truth that cry out to any Jewish souls who are lost among those nations, to awaken their Jewish soul so that they recognize the sheker, the falsehood in those other corrupt belief systems, in the belief systems of the idol worshippers. And so that they recognize also their true identity, that they remember that they are truly a Jewish soul. And so that will cause them, and that will motivate them. It will cause them an awakening, and it will motivate them to return back to Judaism. All of this happened from the tzedakah. The tzedakah causes this peaceful love energy to spread throughout the world and to dissolve, dissipate any hatred, any interference, and interfering energy, the energy which doesn't allow the words of truth to resonate throughout the whole world. That interfering energy is dissolved in the face of the love energy, which was created by the tzedakah, by the charity. And so then the words of truth resonate even in those books, those religious books of the idol worshippers of the 70 nations, and the Jewish souls lost among them reading those books. Now they see these things that are in their own books, in the books of those religions, that are proving that it is not true, that those belief systems are corrupt, are not true, are unfounded. And together with also an awakening that happens within them, recognizing, they start to recognize and become more aware of their true nature, of their true identity, that they are a Jewish soul, and that they were consulted by HaKadosh Baruch Hu when Hashem created the world. Hashem consulted them, as the Medrash Rabbah says that we mentioned earlier. And so then they return back to Judaism. And when they return back to Judaism, when they convert to Judaism, these righteous converts, they cause a wholeness, they cause a perfection to the Malchut of Hashem, the kingship of Hashem, which is represented by the Mizbeach. And when that happens, so then every time that we sit and eat our meals are holy. And they are, instead of nourishing, the food that we eat, instead of it nourishing the animal self, it nourishes the soul, it nourishes our higher divine consciousness. And every time that we're sitting and eating in this way, it means that we're eating at the table of Hashem. And when this happens, so our consciousness is expanded, our divine consciousness is empowered and expanded and enlightened. And we are now able to really experience the light of the tzaddik, because the light of the tzaddik is not a physical light, it's an experience in consciousness. It's an enlightened consciousness. And so now that the consciousness, our higher consciousness, the divine consciousness, has been freed from the confines of the animal self, so we experience what Rabbi Nachman calls an expansion, an uplifting, an enlightening of our consciousness. Now we are able to experience the light of the tzaddik, which is a state of consciousness, and the tzaddik is able to give us a deeper experience of awe and love of Hashem. How does he do that? By shining within our awareness, by shining within our consciousness, an understanding of the purpose that Hashem had in creating the world, the intention that Hashem had in creating the world. And that intention and that purpose is the pride that he prides himself with the Jewish nation. And when that's revealed, so then we come to feel in our hearts the feeling that is comparable to what the subjects of a kingdom experience when the king is celebrated, the kingship of the king, the coronation of the king, the kingship of the king is celebrated, and all the subjects of the king see this wonderful parade, and the king is in his royal chariot wearing the clothing of a king, surrounded by glory and splendor, and then that's a feeling of awe. And so this is the feeling that we feel when in our consciousness, the tzaddik brings the understanding and the experience of Hashem priding himself with the Jewish nation. So the Jewish nation is the glory, those royal clothing that the king is dressed in, right? And presented and shown and now celebrated. His kingship is celebrated. And so everyone feels this awe of the king. And at that time, when that happens, the king experiences a tremendous joy, a tremendous happiness, a tremendous love and fulfillment, appreciation to his subjects, to his kingdom, to all of the people that came out to see him, to all of these people that are celebrating his kingship. Without them, he is not king, right? Without a nation to accept upon themselves this person as a king, then the king is not a king. And melech belo am, right? And so the king has a tremendous appreciation, tremendous love, and tremendous fulfillment, and happiness and joy. And he expresses that to his subjects by telling them that whatever they wish for, whatever they want, whatever they need, they can share with him and he will give it to them. And so that's the experience of Hashem shining his unconditional, infinite love towards us, and giving us all of our needs and all of our wishes in these tremendous presents. And all of that is the effect, right? All of this was put into effect by the charity that we give to many, many people, and specifically if we give the charity, the tzedakah, to a collective soul, the soul of somebody that has devoted their life to learning, to studying Torah, and to increasing Torah knowledge for themselves and for others, and spreading Torah knowledge, divine consciousness. That's a Torah scholar, a Talmid Chacham. And that soul is an inclusive soul. It's a collective soul that many souls are included in his soul. When you give tzedakah to him, it's as if you gave it to all of these many people as well that are all included in his soul. And so we spoke about all of these different psukim that Rabbi Nachman gave us that are alluding to this concept and to these ideas and to these points, the different points of the formula that we mentioned that we're speaking about in this Torah. And that brings us finally to Ot Chet, to part 8 in this Torah. So let's continue inside. V'zeh Perush. So Rabbi Nachman brings us a Gemara from piece from the Gemara in Masechet Baba Batra, Ayin Daled Amud Aleph. The Gemara says, Rav Safra Mishtae. Rav Safra related this story that happened to them. Zimna Chada Hava Kazlina Bisfinta. At one point, we were traveling by a ship. And we saw this fish which had raised its head out of the water. And this fish had horns coming out of its head. On the horns of this fish that raised its head out of the water were engraved, in the horns of the fish were engraved the words, I am the lightest creature in the sea. Meaning I'm one of the smallest creatures. You think I'm big, I'm really one of the smaller ones, one of the smaller or the smallest, right? He says, I'm the smallest creature in the sea, the lightest creature in the sea. The lightest, not the smallest, the lightest. The literal meaning of it in this context is that he's saying that I'm just very insignificant. I'm a tiny creature in the sea. I'm not so big. Va'avina shin parsa. He says I was 300 parsot long. Va'avina shin parsa va'azlina lepuma de Leviathan. I am 300 parsot long, and I went to the mouth of the Leviathan. Okay, so it's pretty big, this fish. It's pretty big, 300 parsot long. Let's say it's 300 miles long, and 300 kilometers long. And still, it's considered the lightest. It calls on its horns, it's engraved, I am the lightest creature in the sea. And it was the food of the Leviathan. So imagine this huge fish, 300 kilometers long or 300 miles long, very, very big fish. And it is one of the lightest creatures in the sea, and it's the food of the Leviathan. And it travels, it goes to the Leviathan to nourish the Leviathan by being the food of the Leviathan. Leviathan is the biggest fish in the sea. Rav Ashi says the Gemara, Amar Rav Ashi, Ahu iza diyama v'devchisha v'itle karne. This was the sea goat, which stirs things up and has horns. Okay, so there's this concept. The Gemara mentions that everything that you have, every animal, every type of animal that you have on dry land, you have a counterpart, you have a similar animal under the sea. And so some of them we are aware of on our own, right? There's a seahorse that is somewhat similar to a regular horse. And there's also chulda shebayam, there's a sea weasel the Gemara speaks about. Basically, everyone, there's a cowfish, I think. Every one of the animals that you have on dry land, you also have a similar counterpart in the space of water under the sea. Some sort of fish, some creature that lives underwater that is similar, that is a counterpart of an animal, a type of animal, a creature that lives on dry land. And so Rav Ashi says that this fish that has the horns, this was the sea goat. Just like the goat has horns, this is the sea goat. And what does it do? It stirs things up and it has horns. Okay, and it's the lightest animal, it's the lightest creature of the sea. Okay, meaning that even though it's so big, it's 300 miles long, but it's still considered the lightest creature of the sea, and it's the food of the Leviathan. So let's see what the Rashbam says about this. Biriya kala means the lightest creature. Biriot ktanot shebayam. So Rashbam explains it doesn't mean literally the lightest creature, but one of the smaller creatures of the sea. Mi biriot ktanot shebayam. Lepume de Leviathan, to the mouth of the Leviathan, the Rashbam explains the Pume de Leviathan sheyochleni hayom, that the Leviathan should eat me today. It was the food of the Leviathan. Iza diyama, the sea goat, shekol ma sheyesh bayabasha yesh bayam chutz min hachulda b'shchitat chulin. Sorry, except for the chulda. So there's everything. The Gemara in Chulin says that everything that you have on dry land can be found in the sea except for the mole. Okay? And so here, this is the sea goat. Just like you have in dry land a goat, you have in the sea also a sea goat. The bechisha, what does it do? It stirs things up. It digs in the sea with its horns, it digs in the sea in search of its food, of what it will eat for that day. So now Rabbi Nachman is going to explain this story. Seems like a story, but it's all secrets, deep secrets of the Torah, which are hidden in these words. Rabbi Nachman is going to explain how it's alluding to and it's representing the different points of this Torah that we spoke about, the different points of this formula. We saw this fish that lifted its head out of the water. Kavra is a fish, but what is it representing? Ze bechinat hatov, shehem chelkei nishmot Yisrael im hagerim hanal, ki dagim asifatan hi metaharatan. Ze bechinat chelkei hanishamot, bechinat rucho v'nishmato elav ye'esof, ובחינת גרים מבחינת נדיבי עמים נאספו. ועל שם זה החכמים נקראים בעלי אסופות, שהם מאספים הטוב עם הגרים, וזה הטוב עם הגרים, אפיגרישה ממאיה. So says Rabbi Nachman, what does the fish represent? The fish represents the Jewish souls that are found in those that are hidden, that were lost among the 70 nations of idol worshippers. And so those Jewish souls are pure and holy, and they're called fish. Why are they represented in this story as the fish? Because one of the laws, one of the halachot that we have regarding fish is that you don't have to slaughter a fish in order to prepare it, to make it kosher, to eat. It doesn't have to go through the proper slaughtering like a regular animal, a kosher animal, in order to make it ready for one to eat, make it kosher for someone to eat. It has to go through the process of the shchita. But a fish, asifatan hitaharatan, the Gemara tells us in Chulin, just by gathering them out of the water, that already makes it kosher for us to eat. And so this characteristic of a fish is very similar to what we know about the neshama, what is said about the neshama. The pasuk in Eov says, unto him, to Hashem, are gathered his spirit and soul. So the spirit and soul of a person is called, what is said about it is that it's gathered to Hashem. Asifa, the same word we have in the halacha regarding the fish. Asifatan, gathering it is what purifies it, makes it kosher to eat. And the same is said about the soul of a person, that when a person passes away, the soul is gathered to Hashem. And so the soul, the Jewish soul, is compared to the fish. It has the same characteristic, the asifatan, like being gathered up, and that's what happens at the end of its life in this world. And that's the next stage, the way that it's lifted up to the next stage and to the next state. And Rabbi Nachman says that by the Gerim, by the righteous converts, we also have this word gathered in that context. The pasuk in Tehillim that says Nedive Amim Ne'esafu. The pasuk says in Tehillim, the nobles of the nations gathered. Okay, so these are the Jewish souls found among the nations which are gathered. They are returned and they are lifted up to the next state. They are returned back to their original place, to their home, to the Jewish nation. And says Rabbi Nachman, because of this also, similar to this characteristic that we're speaking about, the gathering, that is something connected to the spiritual self. Okay, so the spiritual self, the higher self, the divine self, the Jewish soul found among the 70 nations, when they are lifted up from the state of existence in this physical world to a higher state of existence, that's called being gathered. And that's why, it says Rabbi Nachman, the Chachamim, the Talmidei Chachamim, the Torah scholars are also, they're called Baalei Atzupot. They're called the masters of gatherings. Okay, a pasuk in Kohelet. The masters of gatherings. Why are they masters of gatherings? What are they masters at gathering? What have they become masters at gathering? They've become masters at gathering the good found among the 70 nations together with the converts, those Jewish souls. They have become masters at finding those sparks of holiness that are lost in darkness, whether it's among the 70 nations or whether it's Jewish people that were born Jewish that lost their path along the way. The Chachamim, the Torah scholars, are masters of gatherings because they are masters at gathering those souls and lifting them up to a higher state. And as we said, when we're speaking about the spiritual aspect, so lifting it up to a higher state is done by gathering. That's the word asufot, le'esuf. And this good which is found in the bodies of these converts, right? These Jewish souls that are being returned, that are being gathered. That's the fish that we're speaking about in the story. What was said about the fish in the story? It lifted its head out of the water. What is that telling us? What does it do? It removes the consciousness, the higher consciousness, from being drowned in the stormy waters, from the foolishness that was surrounding, which was, that higher consciousness was lost within a state of foolishness that we spoke about. Achiruta ma'asim uksiluta sechel was the term that Rabbi Nachman used earlier in this Torah, that from the shameful acts that causes a foolishness or a incoherence of consciousness. And so the fish lifting the head out of the water means that the converts, the Jewish souls lost among the nations, have the power to lift this higher consciousness out of those stormy waters, out of those states of incoherent consciousness, chaotic thinking, out of those states of foolishness that we spoke about. And this fish had horns, and on the horns were engraved the words, "I am the lightest of the creatures of the sea, and I was 300 parsot long, and I went to the mouth of the Leviathan for him to eat me." So what is the karna? What are the horns representing? Well, the word karna, that word Rabbi Nachman says represents tzedakah. Ze bechinat tzedakah. Why? He's going to give us a reason. He says the aspect of tzedakah we know is the aspect that increases friends. That's the wealth which increases friends. How does wealth increase friends? When a person uses their wealth by in giving proper charity, in giving proper tzedakah. And so that's the aspect that we spoke about, the money, the tzedakah, the charity, which increases the friendly energy, the love energy, the peace energy. שהוא בחינת הון יוסיף רעים כנ"ל, שהוא עיקר הקרן הקיימת לעולם הבא, כמאמר מונבז, אבותיי גנזו למטה ואני גנזתי למעלה. And so Rabbi Nachman says the reason why the tzedakah is the horns, because the word for horns, karna means the capital. And that's in the expression that is brought many times in the Talmud and the Gemara about the capital which stays for a person in the next world as well. A person can enjoy a whole lifetime in this world, all the pleasures of the world, health, wealth, family, meaningful relationships, honor, respect, accomplishments, contributions to humanity, love, connections, certainty, safety, security, exciting experiences, all the pleasures of this world, all the success of this world. And the Gemara tells us that it can still be considered that that person didn't lose any of the merits that he has from his good deeds. All that pleasure that he experienced in this world can be considered eating from the fruits of those merits, while the capital, which is called the keren, is still safe and protected, for waiting for him to enjoy in the next world for all of eternity. And so this is said also about tzedakah. When a person gives charity, a person gives charity in the right way, a person can merit to eat the fruits of that charity in this world, whereas the capital is still waiting for him to be enjoyed for all of eternity in the next world. And so that's called keren kayemet le'olam haba. The capital is waiting for the person to enjoy in the next world. And this is something that we saw mentioned earlier in the Torah about the king Munbaz, the king, that he said that his parents, he had a very wealthy lineage, and he said all of his forefathers, all his grandparents, and in the previous generation, they were gathering wealth, they were acquiring more and more wealth in their lifetime, and by doing so, they were storing their wealth below, meaning they were storing their wealth in this world. But what he did differently was that he used his wealth to give tremendous amounts of charity. And so he said he was storing his wealth in the treasure house above. Okay, he was storing his wealth to enjoy that wealth for all of eternity. By giving it to charity, he will enjoy that wealth for all of eternity. And so we'll see the continuation of this Bezrat Hashem, of explaining the story in the next year.